metric. This is interesting because the biologists would argue whether any two species were closely related or distantly related, and they didn't know where to put them on the tree of life. And Stan Ulam said, I'm going to invent a metric that actually measures the distance of any two species on the tree. And the metric he came up with was quite interesting. He says, take a look at any protein that is common among all the species, but slightly different. And the one he picked was a blood protein called cytochrome C. It's a complicated molecule, and it's slightly different shape for different animals. And he said, what is the minimum number of atomic changes I need to make? It's like Tinker Toys. How many sticks do I have to undo and redo to transform one model to the other model? And he worked out this metric for cytochrome C. And he says, that stands as a metric of how far apart any two animals are on the tree. And it turned out it was a terrifically good metric. And the biologists who were arguing over which animal was more closely related could then use Ulam's metric and figure out where to put some animal on the family tree, because the number of atomic steps you needed to change one version of cytochrome C to the other worked out to be the right metric. So you can get so far with qualitative reasoning, and then when you get down to the nitty gritty, you have to look at small differences that are measurable and countable and quantifiable. And that's where you lose the generalists. They're not going to get into the quantitative stuff, but eventually you have to.
Well, does it? Does it have to? What if it isn't possible? What if a rule of nature is that we cannot define things? Clearly, if I look into complex environment, every new situation can be different, so I cannot define it clearly. And
then you really don't understand it. I mean, if you can't make quantifiable predictions, then and all you have is a qualitative model, then you're going to end up arguing over whose concept is more reliable, because you can't measure the reliability of any two versions of the story. It's like a narrative. I can look out and I can make a narrative of what I see and put it into a story, and then somebody else will put a different narrative in. Well, you can't measure who's got the better narrative.
Yeah, but
they don't get into the nitty gritty.
But how can we then make progress? I know how Darwin did it. Michael Fitzgerald, remember the researcher who researched them? He told it.
Yeah, well, see, Darwin basically got the basic idea without a metric, without a quantitative model. And it kind of got stuck there because people could argue against it, because as long as it was qualitative, it was easy to argue against it. When you finally got to DNA and measurements, all those qualitative arguments kind of fell by the wayside, because you could now measure things with more specificity.
Yeah, but that was how many years later? We cannot with
century.
Yeah, we cannot afford. We have now 10 years or less to get things going on SDGs. These kind of measurements.
Yeah.
I just don't see it happen.
Then you're doing politics and not science. This is the big difference between politics and science. You see a political debate, and each side will take a position and argue for it and against the other side, but you can't say how close they are to the ground truth, because it's all qualitative. Which political policy is going to save us, and which one is not going to save us? You don't have any way to measure that, so you're simply arguing it, in a political format, which you can never get to the ground truth on. I think we really need to discover ways to measure things so that you can make measurable predictions, measurable observations, and figure out who's got the right model.
Well, to tell you the difference, I work in environments as mathematicians. There were more mathematicians around, and we used the data, the numbers, formulas. Whenever the data was easy to create, what was available, it was clearly definable, and the maintenance costs were at acceptable levels. When that was not the case, we switched to patterns. And the end of the result was, for example, we could run our mainframe or the big data center computers at 100% of their capacity in peak hours without users complaining. They had a good response time, yeah? That was a clear result, but maybe tricky to measure because we were pretty much the only ones for quite some time. But
No
what
control
we did
group.
was a combination of data, measuring things, and patterns. And the difference was I had somebody else sitting in my office, and he had the task to predict the future capacity requirements for these computers. He was doing that for a year. I was programmed, tried to get the data, and while the data were way too far apart, the users just couldn't make good predictions.
Right.
But we didn't need it anymore because we had other ways found. We used patterns and found cheaper and highly effective ways to have the right capacity available before it was asked for. It was a matter of combining financial data with architecture and what we had measured. Yeah. So there were gaps or there were jumps, and with all these combined together, we had happy clients at lower cost than the others. Instead of paying IBM and the others millions for upgrades, well, we had good salaries.
Yeah, it was easier with computers because, like down in my basement, I have some old DEC computers, some old DEC iron from the 1990s. And their technology was called MIPS, M-I-P-S, which stood for million instructions per second. Fabulous. You know, beyond the VAX, you had MIPS, millions of instructions per second. Well, now we have gigahertz machines. So the technology was advancing so rapidly that you didn't have to worry about whether you were in thousands of instructions per second versus millions. It was just advancing so rapidly that you didn't have to worry about it. You wait 2 or 3 years and you'd have double the capacity of the previous generation. So if there's rapid progress in technology, you can sort of ignore the sizing issue because you can predict doubling every 2 or 3 years. Not so true in politics. You know, tomorrow's politician is not twice as good as yesterday's politician. That's not going to. The human brain capacity just isn't that good. And if decisions are being made by human decision makers, you're not going to get that much improvement from one generation to the next.
Well, that brings me back to core values, phenomena, root causes. Yeah. If those would be used by the politicians these days, and we have seen that happening, the phenomena with Corona in some countries, right, then politicians can be so much better. Politicians, decision makers in organizations, they can be so much better because right now, the people have lost their trust in decision makers because, well, phenomena occur. People can smell it.
Well, they can see that Americans are dying at a phenomenal rate compared to Europe. Yeah. They know that the politicians in the US are doing a crappy job. We have something like 30% of the world's deaths and 4% of the world's population.
Yeah. And still the best health system, I heard somebody famous saying.
The best what system?
The best, what was it? They're doing a great job. Remember the president?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No matter how terrible it is, he's doing the fabulous job, so he says. But see, he's not grounded. He's disconnected from the ground truth because he's not doing science. I mean, and this is what you can do in political argumentation. You can say anything you want, and there's no way to evaluate it in terms of how far off the ground truth you are.
Yeah, and let me give you another example. Jean-Paul, it's your meeting. We're drifting away in some.
We only have 3 of us.
I'm not drifting away at all. But there are plenty of things that I would like to say, but you are going from one part, which was the molecular reality of particular life systems and the modifications in the molecular reality, and then, yeah, that brings me to my my own essay on the secrets of life itself and the evolution of life. But that is only a physical part, and what we are forgetting is there is also an energetic part in which emotions and purpose and spirituality, those kind of things are happening. And then, yeah, and that is what we males often get flabbergasted about when we predict in our masculine kind of mentality the reaction of a woman, and she reacts totally different than we expected. That type of things are very difficult to account for in a projection of the future. A good friend of mine, the late Professor Paul de Blot, it was business spirituality. He says, well, everything, and he had 5 doctorates and 1 professorate. So he did have some achievements in his life. But he said, everything I planned in my life never came true. And that is the kind of unpredictability that certain things have in a complex theory. I can predict a bunch of things like chaos because we're holding too much. But and it's like putting a finger in the fire. You know that somebody who puts a finger in the fire will jump. The only thing you cannot predict is where he's going to jump to. Is he going to jump to the left, to the right, up or down? Or is he going to cause a bigger fire? Or is he going to stop the fire? That is much more complicated. So yes, I listen to you, and then all these images come along like, are we talking about the same type of complexity? Are we talking about the same type of science? Are we talking about science of Darwinistic science or sociological or anthropological science, which is, wow, it gives some dimensions. I read an article recently that our brain is capable of thinking in 11 dimensions. Well, that easily, yeah, well, 11 dimensions, which means that there is quite some complexity that we can turn into. One of the things that I was trying to show to people was that awareness is one of those, and awareness breakthroughs. I guess that everybody, even, I don't know, Barry, if you are have been married or are married or you have children, but I guess that one of the biggest mental breakthroughs that we have as young people and individualistic and growing up and everything is when we choose a partner. And then suddenly working out our lives in a partnership relationship is kind of a mental breakthrough. And if you don't have children, then suddenly everything changes again. And these awareness breakthroughs, try to tell somebody who has never had any children before what it is to worry about your children, what this energetic things mean. Really try to explain it, and they just haven't got a clue. They try to understand, but they haven't experienced it. So the complexity of arguing about awareness in a community where many people are extremely caught up in their tunnel vision is tremendous. And that is what we experience quite a lot of times, like this weekend in a pretty interesting setting where complex scientists were there to dialogue about how can we organize ourselves around planetary balance and maybe humanitarian balance and our sustainable progress, and how different people reason and how they have difficulties in accepting even that they themselves are human beings and coming back to their biological essence. It's extremely difficult. So yeah, I do want to intervene, but it is more than just 2 words.
Okay.
You know, I've mentioned this before, that I developed a mathematical model of emotions and learning. And it's a little bit more qualitative and less quantitative than I'd like. And mainly because we can't measure the intensity of emotions except kind of crudely. Places like the Media Lab, where they're building sensors, where you could put a sensor on your skin to measure skin conductivity and temperature and other kinds of sensors, they're getting more and more quantitative measurements of the intensity of emotions. But I was able to develop the underlying mathematical model without being able to measure emotions to more than like one significant figure in terms of, you know, positive and negative and strong and weak. So you do start off with qualitative models, and then as you get your metrics, then you can refine the models and do some calculations. There's this whole new discipline called emotional computing or affective computing, which is where computers can actually compute emotional intensity on many dimensions. Speaking of dimensions, you've heard of Chernoff faces. Do you know about Chernoff faces? So there's a guy named Chernoff who wanted to say, you take a bunch of multi-dimensional data that had, half a dozen or a dozen dimensions. And how do you present them to a human so they could digest them? And he came up with the idea of cartoon faces. So one of the channels was the mouth, and one was the eyes, and one was the eyebrows, and one was the shape of the face. And so each dimension modulated some feature of a cartoon face. And he could get about 1 or 2 dozen dimensions into features of a cartoon face. And then you have all your data. Each observation then is a face. And you have an array of faces, and you can recognize the ones that look alike and the ones that look different. And so a human could look at this array of faces from each measurement, multidimensional measurement, and rapidly recognize clusters and differences and things like that. So yes, a person can process a dozen dimensions if they're presented in an appropriate format. And Chernoff faces was this fabulous idea, I think from the 1970s it was. And so you would take this multidimensional data and show it to somebody, and they say, oh, I can see this cluster and that cluster, and these are different clusters. And this is an outlier. That face looks odd. That's an outlier.
I like the idea of perception, and then the agreement on if we perceive the same thing, looking at the same thing, which is also the processing of data is per person different, because we tend to value and process our data according to the experience we've built up, and we tend to project it on a pattern that has been built up in our memories and everything. So, and yours, obviously, having grown up in America in the circumstances and cultural environment of America, may have a different type of interpretation than I have, having grown up in more European type of, and then Northern European, Middle European. I've lived in Sweden, I've lived in England, Netherlands, I grew up in Spain. Even there, the differences in reasoning and interpreting and everything is extremely different. Quite interesting. I don't know if you ever read the book of Geert Hofstede about all the different cultures. He works at IBM, and he differentiated people along different axes, and he published a book about that, about all those cultures, which became a very interesting book about cultural differences, and with extreme dimensions in it. Which is very, very interesting to see. And now with all these multicultural type of environments which we have, because everybody traveling and living in different places where they originally were born, brings in a totally new complexity of valuing how to deal with fear, how to deal with fear for the other. They look different, they behave different, they dress different, they have different rituals and everything. And how do we get to terms with all these kinds of things? It's quite very, very interesting.
That's an interesting one. Actually, I went to a new generation leadership training where I really got to the bottom of of what's standing in the way of people, mental blockades, that kind of stuff. And they were actually able, that needs a class each time of 1 or 3 hours, but when a person was really being coached, within minutes, they were able to get to mental blockades and identify that. Coach the person, so the person was able to identify that. It was really amazing. So the technology is there, but that for a long time, well, the one who originally did that, he was a scientist, but stepped out of science because it was something that just didn't fit the procedures. And in the last 2 classes I did were actually by more traditional scientists. Michael G. Jensen from Harvard Business School, he picked it up. And the other one was over here, somebody at Erasmus University, for which I got then some of the training. It was really amazing. And that was sort of paradigm shift, I can tell you, what they did there.
Yeah.
But the key was at the end of the day to get, well, through the mental blockades, creating new possibilities and really let go of the thinking that's standing in the way.
One of the things about multidimensional data is that it's not obvious which factors, which dimensions are relevant. And you can ignore a dimension that you never paid attention to. And then somebody will come along and say, you're not paying attention to this particular feature. This is an important feature which you're overlooking. And you give it a name, you identify it, and then somebody says, oh, you're right, I've never noticed that before. That's the difference that makes the difference. So even if you're not measuring it quantitatively, you're at least attending to it qualitatively, because you're now saying, I need to look at that dimension. It has a name.
Yeah.
And it has an axis from one extreme to the other. So even if you can't put degrees on your thermometer, you can still say, oh, there's a hot and a cold dimension.
Here's one for you.
Okay.
Barry.
We welcome, by the way, Hugh Pim. Hugh Pim, I'm surprised to see you here because you just sent me an email that you were not going to be able to attend.
Greetings, everyone. I'm just here for a few minutes, just
Oh.
before I leave for my meeting.
Oh,
Thank you.
we were discussing here the experiences of these weekends that we had, and they've been quite interesting. And then suddenly we get into all kind of interesting discussions about how to interpret things, the essentials of life, the differentiations, all kind of interesting dialogues here. So yeah, welcome to join, even if it's for a couple of minutes.
Thank you.
Just to give you an example, if an auto mechanic will open up a hood of a car that's not running well and will listen, and they will hear something that's meaningful. And normally you would think, well, why would the sound matter? It's an engine. But in fact, there are dimensions that matter. And so somebody will say, if you just listen to the sound, you can hear something that helps you diagnose what's wrong. This is what experts do. They know which dimensions contain information that they can decode and which ones to ignore, which ones are noise.
What I'm interested in, maybe we can reflect about that if we have the commonality among all the cultures and everybody at the human level. For instance, COVID-19 and the extension of fear across the world. Fear is extremely interesting and is being misused. We're talking about politicians and everything, and politics obviously depends very much on the votes and tend to manipulate very much in that. And a good friend of mine says it's one of the most dirty games there is in the world. And then we have the dirty game ruling the world, which is something also to reflect about. If I introduce these core human values that I mentioned, like health and safety and those kind of things and awareness, then that is a common denominator among people too. And you don't need to reflect about where you come from. Health is a common denominator for just about everybody.
Universal.
There's something else to that. I don't know whether you recognize that. But when I go back to the new generation leadership training, one of of perhaps the most important thing to get people on board that they brought forward is to create a new possibility. Yeah, and actually they did that by creating a vocabulary people weren't used to. Not myself also often ask, what do they mean? But at the second or third day, all of a sudden it clicked, came together, and one started to understand. Now the trick was creating a new possibility, like core human values, is because it's new, it triggers less contradiction. In fact, if I can make it such a way that the other person says, hey, this is interesting for me, I could benefit from that in my career or whatever, then it's so much easier to get people on board.
Yeah. Talk about health. There was a time when they didn't know about germs, and then germ theory came along, and a man named Lister says, you got to pay attention to germs, even though you can't see them or count them easily yet. You have to take into account that they exist. And so he comes up with these antiseptic practices which are based on the notion that there is such a thing as germs and they're important in health. And that made a huge difference in healthcare. Just being aware of the phenomenon of germs without even being able to quantify them.
Then we have an interesting one, the capacity bottleneck phenomena. Remember, you might have heard from me the ADHD and dyslexia situation of my son years ago. Did I mention it in this round?
Yeah, but I don't remember the details.
Okay. Well, basically, he had daily emotional outbursts, or ADHD, and dyslexia, difficulties to learn reading. And the official therapies delivered insufficient results. And then I discovered that there were therapies using the same practices I had applied to remove capacity bottlenecks in data center computers. One of them is in our navigation systems today, the alternative route. And when I looked into this from many others having made the same experiences, therapies demonstrating practices of capacity management, the brain, architectures, clearly pointing straight to capacity bottlenecks, a common occurrence in the brain, and capacity bottlenecks being reported to exist in the brain in specific areas, not the highway ones, but the long ones. Well, it's pretty obvious. We have here something that explains or that provides the missing link between reported causes of autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and so forth, and their symptoms. Now, next we try to get this, we try to find research. We couldn't find any research that had used these practices from the capacity bottleneck phenomena. Yeah, and at the end of the day, we tried to get research started. It's, by the way, supported by 2 professors in psychiatry. We tried to get research started, but the reaction was, it didn't matter whether it was in science, with politics, even patient organizations trying to represent people with ADHD, autism, and so on. They all said, interesting, sorry, does not fit my procedure, not fit my discipline, I have no knowledge about it. And that's going on since 2006. It hasn't been possible to get the research started. So please help to get this fixed. There's so much that can be achieved by them. Just think about the peace SDG. If people don't have this emotional outburst because they are treated with ADHD. Oh, by the way, his daily ADHD incidence went down to 1 in now 14 years. We are not afraid of violence or something like that being created from an emotional outburst. And when obviously the capacity bottlenecks had been reduced, he was able to learn reading within 6 weeks. And actually before that, he was at a school for special education because of dyslexia.
How old is he? I asked you before, but I don't remember.
He's now, where are we now? 28.
Okay. And how much math did he acquire during his education?
Well, insufficient. That was one of the big disadvantages. He was supposed to be teach in things he did well, and math was one of them. But at the end of the day, the school did not make that happen. That was, yeah.
So despite the school, how much math did he learn?
Well, well, the basic stuff. He had how shall I say? That's called all training and on the job, partially training on the job and school education, and that's relatively basic mathematics. He didn't get to higher education because there was still something in his mind.
So not even algebra then?
Not the deep part, a little bit perhaps.
Okay, because I don't remember how far I got with you on the last time this came up about maybe a month ago, because I have a mathematical model of emotions and learning, which I have mentioned, and I don't remember how much of it I've shown you, but you might want to show it to your son and see whether or not any of it resonates with him, and if so, how much of it if any of it resonates. I could throw up just real quickly if the screen sharing is on, so you can just see what I'm talking about.
Well, before you do that, Barry, we have to say hello to Zvi also, who's coming in from Israel. And if we talk about emotions and that kind of stuff, and that Israel, of course, has a lot of emotions as a country also, and as a population. So indeed, be interesting. But maybe somebody can summarize before you show what you want to show, Barry. Maybe somebody can already summarize what the discussion is all about, so that we can participate. And it came, of course, as well.
I'll let Oike do that. He's a better narrator than I am.
Yeah, we had little discussions about scientific approaches versus approaches for the field, and some sort of gray gap in between. Well, the science is really good when things are quantitative, but in complex environments, that's quite often difficult, if not impossible in my experience. And yeah, there is now the question, yeah, how can we, to me at least, how can we close or bridge, let's say, the scientific side with the people in the field, and can get problems solved, like, yeah, the phenomena example I just mentioned, where it's from a phenomena perspective crystal clear that the missing link in the mental health area between causes and symptoms is the capacity bottleneck phenomenon, but we just don't get the research done. It doesn't fit into the procedures until now. So, did I miss something important?
No, in fact, I was gonna jump into Newton. Because Newton's thinking is the one that inspired me in this notion of emotions and learning. I stole Newton's thinking to do thinking about emotions and learning.
Okay, Zvi, did you get what we are getting at? Because all this is also coming from a discussion about this weekend that we had. Planetary Balance was about, what is it, about 60 or 70 scientists discussing planetary balance and having presentations and getting reflections and breakout rooms and everything. So, and one of the things we noticed was how difficult it was to get these people to join from a broader scope than just a particular tunnel vision, and accept or to step over a particular line of maybe awareness or behavioral analysis or whatever, and actually unite into a common progress instead of just sticking to their own field of intelligence. There's a lot of things to do. How do you get actually people to join in? And then we get into bottlenecks, and we get all kind of whatever's, you know, you can talk about emotions, non-emotions, views, science, politics, whatever, interests, tunnel visions. I could just about imagine a whole load of things that can block progress. And we're looking at an example here, which is a particular one, which on behavior analysis, where Eugen has had very specific experiences with his son. And I can second that because I've had experiences with a lot of people around that too. And so Barry was going to show something from his field of work. So, but maybe you want to contribute already something from your experiences as developing and building up a country over the last 56 years.
I mean, what I have absorbed from Eugene Egan summarizing, not much, but if you are going to make any connection between science and emotion, or build models for emotions, maybe it's good for academia. It's not good for the people on the field. I mean, I cannot, let's say, disseminate emotional model and behave accordingly. I mean, I don't, I mean, I don't use much of emotion in my work or what I'm doing in other activities. I mean, if I have, let's say, a problem or an issue to solve, I'm trying to collect all my professional experiences together maybe with other people and try to find a solution. I used to work with different kind of communities in Israel, and we work together to solve their, let's say, social or economical or health or employment problems or issues, and find a way to do it. I don't know. I mean, I don't think I never built mathematical models or psychological models to work together with people. I always talk to them in the level or eye of my eyes, own eyes, and try to understand them and bring the best people together with me to solve the problem. It's difficult to me. I mean, the same question was raised last week with another international committee that I am participating, and everybody talked about his emotion and things like that. But to my understanding, they were far away from using the emotion to solve issues or problems. What is his name? Barry and other people here talk about politics and models, and I don't know. I mean, that's not my way. I mean, not that I'm against, but I cannot understand how a specific model can fit my activities or other people's activities. I'm trying to look at the reality and try to solve the issues or problems again with my long experiments and together with other people sit around one table and find the best way to help people. Of course, that I'm not doing it, you know, like a dictatorship, but with regard to the community or people that and their history and other aspect of their life to help them.
Ah, very interesting. And thank you very much for bringing this in, because that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm trying to find where the, let's say, a bridge between, on the one hand, there's the science with the models, and on the other hand, the reality where people need to make decisions now without waiting until, yeah, models have been found or proof has been obtained. Because if you look only in the SDGs, well, within 10 years, we must have made big progress. We just can't afford to wait until all the things have been thoroughly researched and accepted.
SDGs will not be solved, I think, with emotions models. I mean, most of the SDGs countries, I mean, are poor countries or not developed one, and they have basic problems of economic and income and employment and maybe climate change with the desert developing going north and north from fertile countries. No, I received a lot of articles about SDGs. I'm subscribed to the academia.edu, and I received hundreds of articles. I mean, I'm reading several of them, not all of them, because they repeat each other what a previous person wrote, and I don't know, it's huge issues. I mean, the vision is excellent. I mean, to help people, to help countries to raise their, let's say, quality of life, level of technology, whatever. But I think it will take many, many years until each country will solve its own problems, or with the help of big corporations that not always are, how to say it, act in an ethical way. Yeah, I know. I'm aware of this issue because in Israel we have what we call SID. It is an organization that works together with the Ministry of, with the Foreign Ministry in Israel to help, let's say, poor countries, mainly in Africa and South America, and in some places also in the Southeast Asia. We help them to develop a lot of agriculture land, because Israel has a lot of, I mean, as international experience with agriculture and irrigation and other kind of technologies that help countries with technologies in agriculture and social aspect. I don't know. I mean, it seems the issues are great, and I think we have to solve one after the other, or to find a solution that send branches to other issues to advance them. Yeah, that's what I mean. There is another one more sentence, please. Let me. I have another international committee with different representatives from different countries, and I told them the same thing I'm telling you. I mean, because they are thinking in the academia level. They are not going down to the field, and the gap between academia and the field is very wide. I think I mean, people have to think in the, let's say, mind or eyes of the people they want to help them. I mean, to understand them. I mean, it's not like in smart cities that there is so many new technologies that very few, I think, are using them. But I don't know. I mean, it is an issue to solve.
Okay, thank you, Sri. Barry, is it still connecting with you, what you wanted to show us?
It is, although I think my position might be somewhat opposed to Tzvi, because he doesn't think that what I'm going to show has much value to the general public. And I think I would agree with him that maybe 5 or 10% of the world's population would have any interest at all in what I'm going to show, because it involves a fair amount of math. In particular, it involves Newton's mathematics. You know, children can play a game of catch. They can throw a baseball and catch it without knowing anything about Newton's calculus, ballistic trajectories. And yet there is a value in knowing ballistic trajectories, especially if you want to shoot a cannonball and have it land where you want. So there's this balance between how good can a child play catch and how much Newton's calculus you need to understand a ballistic trajectory or motion beyond just a child's level of intuition. So if you like what Newton gave us, I think you'll like what I'm going to show you next. At least I think Eugen will. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a flavor of it because it's 35 years of work. And I'm not going to do 35 years of review here. But first how many people have more than one monitor on their computer? So you can watch Zoom? Okay, I'm going to give you the link to the page that I'm going to put up for sharing so that you can independently scroll it if you like. And then I'm going to share it. Oh, you need to turn on sharing, Jean-Paul.
Oh, sorry, yeah, of course. There you go.
Okay, which one is it? It's this one, I believe. Make sure I have the right one here. Okay. Can you see this table here where it says ordinary motion?
Yeah.
This is Newton. Newton says, how are time, distance, velocity, and acceleration related? And if you want to go the next level, the next two time derivatives are called jerk and jounce, but we'll get to those in a minute. So if you appreciate Newton, what Newton does is he gives us a nice mathematical model, essentially the calculus, that tells us how to reason quantitatively about these things. Now, I wanted to understand how to reason about emotions, and in particular in the context of learning. And so I propose an analogy. This is an ordinary journey in three-dimensional space, motion in space, a simple journey. And I said, what about a learning journey? In a learning journey, you still have time because learning takes time, just like a journey takes time. Gaining ground, which we call distance in Newton's model, we just call knowledge. Now, gaining knowledge is gaining ground. The rate at which you gain ground, we call learning. And so the question is, what does acceleration in Newton's model map to in this analogy? And my discovery is that it maps to emotions. So if I can reason efficiently about Newton's model, I can borrow his thinking to reason about the role of emotions in learning. And if you go on to drama and other things, you can actually go to the next levels. But let me just scroll up here to the very beginning where I was 35 years ago. Here's an ordinary wavy function. And over time, it ascends, it falls, it wiggles. And if this were an ordinary journey, you'd say, well, I'm gaining speed and I'm going forward. But then I stop, and for the next unit of time, I go backwards. And then I turn around and go forward some more, and then I go backwards. And so you have velocity, which is the slope. Forward motion is positive slope. Backwards motion is negative slope. And this is a pretty standard model of, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. Well, now what if I plug in my analogy? So gaining ground, which is this axis here, this is the distance axis. I say, well, instead of speed, I call this learning. So this is a learning curve. So in this section, over time, I'm gaining knowledge at a pretty steep rate. But then I stop learning. Why do I stop learning? Because just like if you're traveling, go, oh, I went too far. I'm not where I want to be. So I have to stop and turn around. If you're testing your knowledge and you say, wait a minute, it's not working. What I believe or what I think doesn't seem to match reality. I have a misconception in my knowledge. I have to throw some misconception away. So you turn around and go back to a place where you were solid. So I can use the same model for a learning journey. I have learning and unlearning, then some more learning, and then some unlearning. The unlearning is throwing away the misconceptions. But notice, instead of a monotonic learning curve, which most people draw, I have a non-monotonic learning curve. It has wiggles in it. It has second derivative in it. it's concave down. It's convex up, concave down, convex up. That's the second derivative. In Newton, that's acceleration. What is it in a learning journey? The analogy is it's emotions. So if I'm laboring under a misconception, I'm disappointed or I'm confused or I'm surprised because what I believe isn't turning out to be the case. My expectations aren't being met. And the reason is because up here in my head, I have an idea that's got a bug in it. I gotta weed out the bugs. So you throw away the bugs, go back to an earlier position, and then turn around and get a better model. So this is a simple borrowing of ordinary motion. Instead of time, distance, acceleration, velocity and acceleration, I've got time, knowledge, learning, and emotions. And you can see that the concavity or the convexity is negative valency motion and positive valency motion. If I do something that's should I stop there?
I'm saying interesting because, well, John Paul knows about it. I've developed information management model for the brain, and emotions, positive and negative, are part of that. They are needed. And the other thing in there was the matter of forgetting.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
This can also be forgetting right here.
Yeah.
So you can lose knowledge, not because you threw it away intentionally, but it just evaporated.
Yeah.
And you got to start over.
But
But when you start over, you generally do a little better.
this is very similar to my own model about the complexity, and this kind of sinusoid, which has a tendency of going up, can be seen as a spiral too. Spiral that, and then spiral going through chaos, and then a new learning curve, and then we are satisfied with what we learned. We stick again. We fall back into control systems and everything until chaos appears again.
Right.
And it keeps going on like that. So yeah, we recognize this very well, and I think this was the image that you showed. Not last week, I think it was the week before.
More like a month ago.
Yeah, about a month ago, yeah.
So, and we'll get to the spiral because you can do a phase plane and a phase space diagram. In a phase plane, you model velocity against acceleration.
Mm-hmm.
And in phase space, you model distance, velocity, and acceleration in 3 dimensions all at the same time. And so if you go to just the, let me just say which emotions I'm considering, because these are emotions connected to learning. So these are the kind of axes that are relevant to learning: anxiety versus confidence, boredom versus fascination, frustration versus euphoria. There's a spirit axis, there's a fear axis,
Yeah.
there's an embarrassment pride axis, and a contempt and inspired axis. You can pick as many emotion axes as you think are germane to learning, but these are the ones that I ended up picking, starting with this one at the beginning and working my way down. If I go to the phase plane, and here I put the second derivative, acceleration in Newton's model, affect or emotion in the learning journey, I put this on the horizontal axis. This is kind of backwards from the way you do it in rocket science. And I put velocity, which is learning and unlearning, on the vertical axis, which gives you 4 quadrants. So this is the ascending part of the sinusoid. You're building knowledge, but you haven't tested it yet. Then when you go to test your knowledge to see if it makes good predictions, if it doesn't make any good predictions, you end up over here in the quadrant 2, where you stop building knowledge and begin to say, wait a minute, I'm not getting what I expected. So you have disappointment or confusion. So that puts you in quadrant 2, where you're slowing down and stopping. If you have a misconception, you got to throw it away. That's this going down. So the unlearning, or maybe just the forgetting, puts you down here in quadrant 3, where you're discarding the useless or the forgettable parts of your knowledge base. You're going backwards, 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. And this is kind of the what I call the dark tea time of the soul. The most dispiriting part of the cycle is where you say, oh, I spent all that time working up this mental model and it's no good. It just doesn't work. I'm not getting anywhere. So you throw away the parts that you have diagnosed as misconceptions. Then you say, okay, now that I've taken out the garbage, I'm going to go back and do it, better this time. So you get back over to quadrant before, where you're going to begin to do some fresh research. And as soon as you get some new ideas, you're back up here and building knowledge. So in the phase space, on this version, you go counterclockwise. If I now add the knowledge axis as the third dimension coming out of the paper, then I get the spiral. And that's down here. You get the helical spiral, which is the Excelsior spiral, onward and upward. So you have emotions on this axis, front to back you have learning, and upward you have gaining ground, gaining net knowledge. But you don't gain net knowledge monotonically. You gain some knowledge, but then you have to throw away the errors. Then you gain some more, throw away the errors, gain some more. So you have this helix that's at a cockeyed angle because you don't learn monotonically. See, if you learn monotonically, it would just be an always ascending spiral. But because there's wiggles, because you have built-in misconceptions to throw away, your three-dimensional helix is at a cockeyed angle. Emotions this way, learning this way, and knowledge that way. So that's the basic model. And you can begin to fill in the blanks. So those axes, you can qualitatively, without putting the numbers on them, without a metric, you can just have named degrees of these axes. You have extreme anxiety, or high confidence, or anything in between. You can have total ennui and boredom. It's putting me to sleep. Or you can have utter fascination, or anything in between. The same with all these axes. You can go to the dictionary and find nice, ordinary dictionary words that even a youngster can have in their vocabulary to disclose where you are on these axes. You have the aversive, negative valence side. You have the appetitive, positive valence side, and everything in between. And you may or may not be able to put numbers on them when you want to go quantitative, but at least qualitative. So that's your basic model, because if I can reason about ordinary motion, thanks to Newton, then I can simply borrow the reasoning over here. And in particular, I want to know, where am I or my student or my son in this phase space? Is he here? Leave him alone. He's building knowledge. Did he build some misconceptions or some gaps? He's over here. And you've got to diagnose the gaps and misconceptions and understand the associated emotions. If it's just a gap, go back here and build some more. If it's a misconception, you got to go down here and throw it away. And these are the emotions that people don't want to talk about. So you can do this qualitatively, or you can do it quantitatively, depending on the level of mathematics and quantitative thinking you want to put into it. In affective computing, you want to actually try to do this as quantitatively as possible. Once you've got this basic model with these 4 quadrants, you can go on to the next level, which is drama theory. And I won't do that today because that's going to be too much to talk about. But in the chat, I gave you the link to this webpage, which has got this whole story of drama theory, motions and learning, and even some economic theory.
Yeah, Barry, I must say, thank you very much for some additional confirmation you actually provided just now for the model I mentioned. The information management model for the brain.
So Eugen and I probably should spend an hour on like 3 occasions to walk through this whole thing, because you can just go and walk through the web page and you may get most of it, but feel free to set up just a one-on-one session or however many you want to see.
I must admit my priorities are slightly different right now. It's just I've worked in that field as well. And what you just said pretty much confirms certain elements of that model.
Yeah.
A theoretical model at this time.
When we presented this model for the very first time in a public setting in a conference, it was in 2001, the International Conference on Advanced Learning Technologies. A lot of people there were doing tutoring, AI tutoring systems. that model, which we had just published, won the Best Theory Paper Award.
Okay.
There was nothing like it in the literature that was mathematical in nature. So we won the Best Theory Paper Award. We had NSF funding for a decade on that in the first decade of the 2000s. But this model is probably not going to appeal to the people that Z is interested in, the general public, because it's too academic. It's graduate level math. And I appreciate it's graduate level math, but maybe 5% of the population can find it useful.
Now apply it to societies, because on individual level, yes, I can recognize this. I've drawn this model up for about 15 years ago. When you were at it, I was at it also from a human complexity point of view, and the axis, I call them our moral complexity and our organizational complexity. And then you get up to 4 quadrants, more or less in the same, and it's circular way. I even go back to Dante.
Right.
And the Commedia Divina, the Divine Comedy, which brings in the fear, the rejections, and all these type of feelings before you actually get to acceptance and a new cycle, initiation of cycle. The thing is that on individual level, we do tend to have this possibility on individual level to get to a deeper understanding. At societal level, it goes way behind the individual level potential. So it takes a long time for the collective to actually reach a new stage, a new spiral, and hide. And maybe what we can come up with is that we are actively, without the abstraction and everything, but also into the practical reality of understanding people and having empathy with people, that guiding them towards this new paradigm, which has its urgency, but at the same time, the determination that we have to put in to make it happen. So these models, as far as I'm concerned, certainly in the hands of a certain group of people, are extremely valid, not only to understand the balance that we can achieve, but also the difficulties that many people have to overcome the fears and the difficulties and everything and the letting go part and everything, all the securities they feel, because they just don't sense yet that same complexity, don't trust it maybe.
That's where the part that I just barely showed you was the Bardic arts, the drama theory. Because after I had the basic model for emotions and learning, the next thing I developed was the drama theory, which gets into things like fear and the relationships between people who are at odds with each other. Because in a drama, you have the protagonist and the antagonist, and they have to sort of be at odds with each other. So that part I think is of more general interest, and you can do that part without the Newton model part, but it's really the same general calculus. It's just that it's more familiar. The drama theory is a more familiar thing to humans than it is the Newtonian motion model.
With one problem there, which is the unpredictability of politicians playing with interests, right? The abstract of Newton and everything, that there's predictability in it, because there are laws of that can be applied. Even in emotions, there are particular laws that can be applied. But in politics, this is so unreliable because it can wave just about anywhere, according to the interests that are being pursued, especially also if they are trying to motivate a huge amount of people at certain stages of their processes to actually lure them into voting for them. All kinds of things that can happen. So it's like, how do we deal with the unpredictability there?
Yeah, that's why you have drama. If you look at game theory, you have the pioneering work of John Forbes Nash and his theorems. He gave us the basic theorems for game theory. If you go from in a game, the objectives are equal and opposite. What I want is exactly 180 degrees opposite of what my opponent wants. My gain is his loss, and my loss is his gain, equal and opposite. In a drama, the objectives are not equal and opposite. They're at cockeyed angles from each other. And so you can generalize from game theory to drama theory. I'll just do this real quick. Oh, I went to the wrong page. Let's see. Here. Let's see, where is it? Okay, so if you take a storybook character, you start off with fear as the innermost emotion, and then all the other emotions above it. So this resides way down in the amygdala and the hippocampus, the fear processing sections of the brain. And in the limbic system, you have all the other burbling emotions. Then in a drama, your character has typically an undisclosed backstory, what they haven't told you that really drives their life story. And out of the backstory, they have burning, unresolved issues. And then they have beliefs, which tend to be pretty stable over long periods of time. But whatever your beliefs are, you have associated derivative practices, practices that make sense if these beliefs are reliable. And then you have your desires, which are kind of the opposite. These are dreads, these are desires. These are nominally inverses, but not exactly inverses. And then you have intentions, typically in like a Shakespearean drama. The character makes an intention at the beginning, which says what their goal is, what their objective is. Sometimes in a drama, it's a prophecy rather than an intention that plays this role. And then you have the drama.
Okay.
But
Do you
the
have
idea,
do you have an 11?
no, I don't.
Well, I put the 11 there, which is relief, which is
Catharsis.
catharsis. Whatever you mean with that now, give it a definition. As far as I'm concerned, the relief is to understand that it is a drama and that you get out of that in a positive sense.
Yeah, 11 would be the meta level of understanding this model. In a typical Shakespearean comedy, the characters are at odds with each other because they have competing beliefs and practices. In a comedy, they figure out where they are in this model and they have a big laugh about it. In a tragedy, they don't figure it out.
Yeah, true.
So the main difference is whether or not they get this model at some crucial point. The moment of revelation is whether you get this or not. If you get it, then you laugh about it and
That's
all's
right.
well that ends well. If you don't, you've got Romeo and Juliet killing each other.
Well, I want the laughing part.
But if you go back to John Forbes Nash and your game theory, say you have a soap opera with 6 characters, just call them A, B, C, D, and E. So A has their own character with their own fears, their own desires, their own objectives, their own emotions, and they are pursuing that. And so they do a gesture, a speech act or a gesture, and at least one character has to react. Otherwise, there's no drama. So let's say character D is the respondent who responds to something from A, but that doesn't cause A to react, it causes a third character to react, okay? And this character reacts to this guy's behavior, which then triggers a response from this character. And this character then triggers a different character, and so on. But in order to have continuity to the drama, it has to close on itself. So the continuity theorem is illustrated here, and I call it Clancy's theorem, because Tom Clancy wrote a spy novel called The Sum of All Fears. And because this thing is a vector balance, the sum of all fears has to balance out to net zero, which is Shakespeare's much ado about nothing. So I steal much ado over here. This is all the drama. And the fears is what drives it. And in order to have continuity of the drama, this has to close on itself, otherwise it just stops. So I call this diagram a vexagon, because if you watch a drama, can you infer the elements of each character? Can you go back to this character model and say, oh, character A, I can fill in the blanks for character A. I can fill in the blanks for character B. And if you have a character-driven drama where the playwright chose the characters correctly, then you'll get this nice Clancy's theorem where the drama will have continuity.
Now, if you go to the essence of life, then it's contradictory to this, because we are looking then at co-creation. We're looking at bonding and not separation, no dispute, not fears. We're looking at securities and figuring out how things connect to each other, which is in my model, it's the top of the things. And that is the part of what you were saying, the laughing part, looking at the laughing part with that security part. And then you will probably get a different diagram, which where the interactions are enhancing each other rather than competing with each other.
So if the characters who are in this pattern, there is this is the drama pattern. If they zoom out and see the pattern itself, including their role in the pattern and all the other characters, then they have this meta insight.
That's right.
They understand that they're in a drama. If they're in a drama, then they can jump out of the drama. They can fix the drama. If they're very self-centered and they don't really figure this out, then they're stuck in this drama.
That I think.
And so what you want is for the characters who are stuck in this pissing contest, stuck in this drama, to be able to zoom out to recognize the corresponding character models of all the characters and how they generate this drama. And then you say, do I want to be in this drama or not?
Now let's look at this analogy that of this drawing. Keep this drawing here, and let's just consider that A is government, F is science and education, E is citizens, D is business development and everything. C could be bankers, B could be religion, and they all have the drama. Okay, and that's the current drama, and we're trying to break through this drama. And there are a couple of us that stand above that drama and look at the drama and say, this drama is real and is actually destroying the planet and the human relationships. Yeah, how can we use this to change the drama around and become constructive?
Right. So if you identify the characters as you have, you simply have to go back and say, okay, for government, what does government fear? What does government want? What does business fear? What does business want? What does religion fear? What does religion want? And fill in the elements of the character for each character in the soap opera. And then you can anticipate how the drama is going to play out, or at least how it recurses. Because each time that you recurse around this cycle, it's going to be different, but it's all going to fit the same general model. So the next time around, when A does something, it might be E who reacts. And when E reacts, the next time around, it might be D who reacts. So once you can map out how this drama cycle plays out, that each time around it, you get more data, more evidence to fill in the details here. When you get enough details filled in, then you have enough high-level insight, you know, the God-level insight. And once you have the insight, then you can manage this drama more wisely, more intelligently. And I think this is where Zvi might find some value in recognizing how this drama plays out by the interaction, the interrelationship of these different players, and how, as you begin to map it out, this person can say, I'm getting smarter, I'm getting wiser. I know that if I do something, it's going to trigger that guy or this guy. And so you begin to modulate your behavior patterns so as to make this thing converge. So instead of cycling forever, you want it to converge.
I have some comments. First of all, thank you for the description. I think this is the second time that you explain it to us. And I want to tell you that I try to keep myself on the right axis, not on the left one. Yeah. Because, I mean, how to say, my motto in life is not to give up. And yeah, and again, if there is a issue or problem to solve, I'm trying to, how to say, to learn all the details. I'm not coming in advance with a solution and say, this is the only solution that you have to take. No, I'm doing some field work and I want to know all or most of the details, and then to draw the best picture that I can have. My other point is that when there is a conflict between different actors, I'm trying to find a common interest among them, and I'm putting all my effort to take this common interest and to start working.
Yeah. To get the characters more aligned and less butting heads. See, in the soap opera, they're all butting heads and cockeyed angles with each other. If you can get them all aligned, then you can collectively make progress. So the characters are collaborating to create a drama, but the drama is not productive. So you have two kinds of collaboration. You have the non-constructive collaboration that's generating wasteful effort, the drama that's getting nowhere. And as people adjust, the drama moves into a joint direction, the becoming direction that's becoming for everybody, as opposed to unbecoming directions, which is the spiritual stuff. Because those of you who know your religion know that becoming is the English translation of the name of the deity of the Old Testament.
If I'll use your description about the drama, I mean, I'm trying to reach the climax of the drama and not not destroy it. I mean, because each, let's say, drama as an expression, as a vision, as goals, whatever, and I'm trying to reach them.
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to adjust the perceptions and behaviors of the characters collectively, so that instead of burning up your time and energy, getting nowhere, a soap opera that never ends, you're collectively working your way out of the mess and to a common cause, a common goal. And it takes millennia. You know, you start here 5,000 years ago, and where are we, you know, in 2000 today? You know, not a whole, we haven't quite gotten to nirvana yet. But this is the model.
Barry,
I'll give you another example. I mean, I guess you know a little bit about the Jewish history. I mean, after the Holocaust, where Jews became, let's say, ashes, I mean, they collect all their self-powers to create the state of Israel. They didn't give up, although they suffer so much, it is impossible to describe even. And yeah, this is, I mean, I'm missing a lot of English words to explain it to you, but for many of the Israelis, I mean, this is an example for life. I mean, not to give up. Israel is considered a startup nation, and we are leading a lot of new innovations all over the world in many, many fields, whether it is medicine, technology, education, agriculture, whatever. And we never stop, because this is the, let's say, the essence of our life. I mean, to keep our life, to be alive, not to give up, because we have no other option.
See, this is what sort of motivates people in life. This is the grit. You know, the thing that drives us at the highest level of spirituality is having the grit to slog your way through all this drama and suffering. But you're, you know, what Jean-Paul was talking about, the different characters. You know, here's your businessman. You know, here's your educator and your students. You know, here's your religion people. So they're all working in their own local economies, and these local economies are interacting. This model here, I stole from James Clerk Maxwell. Maxwell says, if you have some electricity, it generates magnetism. If you have some magnetism that's in motion, it generates electricity. Well, borrow that basic idea of James Clerk Maxwell, that fluctuations and flows in one economy induce flows and fluctuations in a neighboring economy, and it propagates on down the line. So at one extreme, you have the material economy, which is easy to measure. And the other end, you have the spiritual economy, which is kind of hard to measure, and all these in-between ones. And I'm just borrowing the concept from James Clerk Maxwell that flows and fluctuations in any one domain induce corresponding flows and fluctuations in the neighboring ones back and forth. And you have
Okay.
different players who are living in these different economies.
Okay. When I look now into Jean-Paul's email from this morning, or was it? Oh, this afternoon, he's saying there, what steps do we envisage to break out of the old paradigm? So, Barry, what would be your steps to break out of the old paradigm? How could you apply that? How could you get this out?
You're talking about governmental paradigm or just cultural paradigm?
Well, you have introduced something. You have done that for a good reason. You have very emotional about it. So there's a
Barry,
paradigm. Yeah.
Barry, before you answer, maybe,
Okay.
the paradigm I'm referring to is really the interrelated drama that you are painting here, and we are going to another level, which may be in a different type of drama, but at least a constructive one in relation to our planetary reality. We have created a fake drama with all kinds of institutions and everything pursuing some kind of image that we invented together, which is called money or whatever, and we are creating fake realities, which are in cities that we put shops full of products and everything, and we think that there is abundance, but yet behind that there is a big desert of destruction. So we have to break through the interlinkages also of a old paradigm. It's not just government, it's not just business. It is just everything interrelated that has to be broken up into pieces and brought back together into something which is much more empathetical with the human and servant to the human being and the planet than destructive using the human being and the planet. That is a major breakthrough.
Yeah. I mean, Eugen talked about tunnel vision. I think it was Eugen who said tunnel vision, maybe it was Jean-Paul. But the idea of each of those characters in the drama is in tunnel vision in their own domain. And if you can widen their perspective, if everybody can zoom out and see their role in the drama, and take an understanding and an interest in the role of the others, then that will help them modulate how they play their role. So instead of having this endless getting nowhere, they can begin to adjust themselves to gain some net gain for the whole planet. That's the paradigm shift. It's zooming out. It's the meta level. It's moving from I'm in it for myself, screw everybody else, to we're all in it together. And if you can understand where you're all in it together, then the drama model kind of merges into a collaboration model instead of a competitive model. It's how you get from the game of competition to the game of cooperation, because you understand the feedback loops that are inherent in this hexagon diagram, that the feedback loop is complicated because it's going to bounce off of all these other characters in the soap opera, but it's eventually going to come back. And if you can understand that cycle, then you can modulate your own behavior so that when it comes back to you, it doesn't smack you in the face. That's the paradigm shift. It's zooming out. It's meta thinking, which is what we call wisdom. Wisdom is meta thinking, metacognition.
The way I did it, Barry, and that's maybe coinciding with your analogy, I stepped out of the paradigm as an individual and started defining for myself a different type of rules or a different type of context. In this case, not monetary context, but a sustainable human progress context. And I started inviting the bits and pieces of the old drama to come with me,
right.
Which meant that each of the players of that old drama had to redefine their authenticity and everything in the new context. I could do that on a local level, and because the players at the local level are recognizing themselves in the priorities that I was defining. I don't know if we can do that at this stage at global level. I think we will have to do maybe the sum of a lot of local challenges doing these kind of things. Yeah, everywhere around the world until we get to a stage that we can bring the new reality up to, again, a new kind of local cohesion.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because if you're character A in that drama and you only behave as character A, you're going to stay stuck in that pattern.
That's
So
right.
how can character A begin to encompass the adjacent characters? And if everybody can zoom out and have empathy and understanding for their neighboring characters, gradually you work your way out to where your most opposite number, your most antagonistic player is now brought into the same tent. So you understand where your antagonist is coming from. So that's how you turn the tragedy into comedy, into an enlightened comedy. But you got to zoom out. You got to understand the person who's most unlike you and how their behavior impinges back on you. So that's not easy to do. I think that's graduate level, meta thinking.
Well, it's
Okay.
another, yeah, I want to, the analogy of Huygens and his son is also one of the things that now that I've presented a choice between two contexts, the drama and the comedy context, if you like, I invited people to my comedy, and when they come from a drama, there are certain characters in the drama that actually attach much value in having everybody in that drama because they have a particular interest of that drama to continue.
Right.
Then in order to stimulate them to let go of that insistence, we use the new laws of, for instance, zero tolerance against pollution, for instance, and say, if you continue like that, we will bring you to justice. That we will not accept that anymore. We had to accept it when there was only the drama play, but now that we have the comedy and the comedy is not polluting, then we invite you either to join us or to leave the game. Yeah. So we put the patchwork on the eye of the dyslexia or whatever type of person and trying to reconnect the brain by blocking certain elements, the senses.
I think this is why people love stories, especially people who don't have graduate level mathematics. They love stories. They're not going to sit still for an academic lecture on math, but they'll sit still to attend an opera or a Western or some kind of a drama series. And what the drama series does is that you will identify with, so I'll identify with Spock, for example, in Star Trek. Okay. And I might understand, but not identify with, I don't know, Deanna Troi, who's the empath, because that's my weakness. She has this magical ability to get inside other people's heads. But as you appreciate the roles of the other characters, you can begin to get this bigger picture, because you're not just seeing the one character that you identify with, you're seeing their interaction with all the characters. So the ability to write dramas, to create meta dramas that are a model of our own culture, this is a very useful skill. As a scientist and as an engineer, I didn't have that skill. I'm not a playwright, okay? And so I could watch a play and I could say, okay, that was entertaining, but what did I learn from it?
Now, the thing, when I presented the two paradigms, for myself, I grew into my own paradigm. I had the benefit of understanding the old paradigm. And that is something that I value, that I have over other people who I invite to a paradigm they don't understand yet. And they need courage to do so. And I have to understand that courage. And I have empathy with them. If they join me, I feel honored. And it's not critical to the old paradigm, because the old paradigm has been working for 5,000 years, as you've been saying. We build it up, the drama, to a stage that the drama has to finish and has to connect to something else. because otherwise the drama will finish by itself simply because of the nature of it. So
You burn
it's,
up all your energy.
yeah, but knowing by heart what the game is in the old paradigm, because I've experienced it and I see it and I have lived it in many years, even in myself taking responsibility in one of the parts, blindly taking responsibility in it until I stepped out and started recognizing even my role in that. That is extreme, but then understanding the difficulties that other people can have in letting go is very significant. It makes me maybe humble, but as Zvi was saying, very insistent too, because I see that there is a solution in the paradigm that I developed because it came out of that drama, and I started seeing the things in a different way and connected with it, and did proof of context in the city that I live. And I have 21 municipalities uniting right now, and I'm looking at a lot of different places where they would like to apply it, but they run into the same difficulties of getting drama into comedy. So
It's a challenge, especially it's a challenge for us engineering types, scientific types. This is not our forte. But I think just as they talk about going from STEM to STEAM, adding the arts to the science, technology, engineering, mathematics, this is my way of adding the arts into, I'm using the tools for thought of STEM.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that went into building that model came from my STEM background. Yeah. Science, technology, engineering, mathematics, the modeling, but now I'm modeling human culture, human behavior, human drama, using those original scientific academic tools for thought. And now that gives me a leg to stand on to think about the arts. How do I take what I do and make it more artful?
Gary, I understand that. I understand also that exactly what you are saying is what Eugen applied in his private life, and what Zvi applied in his new nation, which only is about 60 years old, and had to build up from scratch.
Right.
And so they were trying to create a comedy out of the drama they went through. And the same thing with Eugen. Same here. Mahendra built up his Zen resort on Bali, built on his perception of a totally new reality, and he made it real and tangible for other people to recognize that. And now it is an issue to spread across the world. Maybe we can use his experiences to develop health and sustainability areas instead of the old Silicon Valleys and everything. We can now establish instead of Silicon Valley, because they're obsolete. All these kind of things are not necessary anymore. So we get space and we get buildings and we get other things that we can use for a totally different type of environment, which, as far as I'm concerned, is what I say is the community, is the economy of growth of core values. But we first have to create those core values together. So once we have created them, we can expand them across the world. Well, Eugen did. You did, and you theorized it even, and you put it into a context of drama to comedy, as we have said. So I think we have a common denominator here in the whole group, that we recognize each other. We all each have a different contribution to it. The only thing is we have to make it grow. We have to make it grow so that the world actually joins this as a movement where they can find their new level of security and their new level of progress.
Okay. It's a challenge. I mean, I spent 35 years just on that technical model. That's, and I'm no slouch when it comes to doing research. So, and then a playwright will spend a lifetime, writing fabulous dramas and not be familiar with this model. I'll tell you a funny story. Here in America, they have a summer writers workshop at the University of Iowa. And a colleague of mine was teaching journalism. She liked to go to these summer workshops to practice her writing skills. And so she said, why don't you come with me to this Iowa Summer Writers Workshop? And I said, well, I don't really write like that. I write maybe scientific essays. She says, well, they have a session on scientific essays. Why don't you come? So I did. And we met for a week, each of our individual sessions. She went to one on memoir writing, and I went to one on writing scientific essays. And at the end, we had the big banquet the last night. And so I'm at a table with all the people who were doing scientific essays. And I was mentioning over dinner this model to the people at my table. And at the next table over turned out to be the drama writers from Hollywood. And I was sitting at the end of the table next to them. So I'm talking to my table about this model of drama theory. And the guy next to you says, can I listen in on this? This sounds interesting. It turned out that the Hollywood scriptwriter found this model useful because it took what he knew intuitively and made an express calculus out of it. And now when I watch dramas that are written by Hollywood scriptwriters, I see that they obey this model, which helps me understand where the drama is coming from. I don't have the talent of writing the drama, but I can see that the model characterizes how the drama is constructed. So there was this kind of a funny connection.
Eugen.
Yeah, it's getting late, and there is a matter of how do we get or break out of old paradigms in. May I bring in an idea
Sure.
for the system level? So we have now had quite some discussion on how, yeah, we could build something bottom up. But well, if you allow me, I'll bring it in. But for that, I would need screen sharing.
Of course, I'm
Sure.
already at it. I'm already. I'll make you co-host. Here you go.
Okay. So I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the background to this is Einstein's famous quote: "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." The challenge with that one is it has been used over and over again, and something was missing. And that leads to the question, but how do we know what works well in today's complex and constantly changing world? Well, there are a couple of solution elements to that, but when it comes to the paradigm change needed, somehow
Eugen, can
Yeah.
you make this a bit bigger? Put the screen. Yeah, that'll do it. Yes.
Yeah. So, oops. So now let's go down a little bit. So when I asked the question, yeah, where do things go wrong and how could we get attention from the people? Well, there's something going on right now. People can smell when something is not right, not just with a communication, but with an action, with a project, with a new initiative, you name it. And here's a couple of reasons why. Symptoms are treated, for example. The root causes remain unsolved. Phenomena occur, but they are overlooked or neglected. We look up to Einstein, Newton, and Darwin. They're out-of-the-box thinking. The simple roots they identify this why. And then, when out-of-the-box innovations are called for, they must still be processed and implemented within-the-box practices, or shall I say, with the same practices that created the problem situation. And then complex matters are split into supposedly manageable parts. Nobody feels responsible for the root causes located outside the parts. Nobody feels responsible for ensuring the whole works. And then we have the matter of definitions, numbers, and linear processes. We had a pretty good discussion last weekend in this conference. And the scientists in there agree, yeah, in complex environments, counters in situations cannot be defined nor expressed through numbers or linear processes. And with the requirement of the left overlooked for about 2 years, or for about 20 years, we have had 20 years of where the wrong decisions were made whenever these things not expressible in numbers had been missed. So the idea is now, what if we create something that can go around, present it or whatever, that simply tells, let's stop doing this with your project. Please review your project. Does anything of this apply? Then what are you going to do about it to fix it or to prevent the damage that may be created if you can't do it? So this is basically a way of bringing something to the point that's going on sort of for 2 decades now in the business world, in the governance world. And well, I was wondering if we could, with these things, well, I would expect especially in Germany, they're tired of symptoms being treated. Even journalists ask these days whether the causes are treated. So there must be a way to utilize this, in my opinion, so the message gets across and people start stopping doing the things that lead to lost trust, as people can smell something is not right here. Any feedback on this?
Yeah, I have something that Eugen kept asking me about paradigm changes, and I actually wrote something about paradigm changes, which first I'll drop in the link to it, and then if you like, I'll share it. It's a very short piece, but I can't show it until Eugen takes down his.
Stop sharing.
So that's this one here. This is pretty recent. You see, it's only a couple of years ago, and it's about paradigm shifting that we're in. I started with a classical model due to Giambattista Vico, the Viconian cycle, which Western civilization has been in this cycle for, I guess, about 5,000 years. They began with the theocratic or divine age, where all the governing authorities claimed that they were exercising the divine right of kings, and that evolved to the aristocratic or heroic age, which supplanted the theocratic age, and then we emerged into what we're currently in, or sort of coming out of, which is the democratic age. This cycle kept repeating in Western civilization for millennia. But what happened is that this led to actually all three of these led to the chaotic age. And the reason we're in the chaotic age, I didn't understand it until I understood what was common among these three ages here. No matter who is making the rules, what you're ending up with are rules. Whether the king makes the rules, or the aristocrats, the plutocrats make the rules, or whether the Congress makes the rules, they're making rules. And why are we in the chaotic age? Because thanks to chaos theory, we learned that rule-based systems are inherently chaotic. If you want to make chaos, build a system out of rules. I don't care who makes the rules. If you're making them out of rules, it's going to be chaotic by mathematical definition. Okay,
thank you for confirming this.
so here we are in the chaotic age, because it doesn't matter if it's Trump or Congress or the king.
Yeah.
Rule-based systems are inherently chaotic. Okay, so how the hell do you get out of the chaotic age? Okay, and the answer is, if you understand that rules make chaos, what doesn't make chaos? What doesn't make a dysfunctional system? You replace the rules by functions, which is mathematics. If you want to regulate a complex system, you have to have a system model. If you solve the system model for best practices for management, you don't get a set of rules, you get a set of functions. And the functions are, to a first approximation, the function inverse of the system model. If you have the system model, you solve it for the best practices, you end up with a set of functions, continuously maybe differentiable functions. And in feedback control theory, that's how you make a system well regulated, not with rules, with functions. And so that brings us to the cybernetic age, where you solve for ethical best practices mathematically. And that puts us into the fifth age, which technology is in. When you turn on your technology device and it's well behaved, when your elevator runs smoothly, when your cruise control runs smoothly, when your automatic gain control runs smoothly, that's because what's in the feedback loop is a carefully crafted function and not a simple rule. And so in
yeah, I must admit, with the mathematics kind of thing, partially I agree, but it's where mathematics doesn't work in the complex environment. That's where we need things like Darwin's survival of the fittest. It's not a mathematical formula. We need core values by which decisions can be made. Otherwise, with mathematics, and I've experienced that in my company, the company I work, at some time, yes, everybody or everybody in the higher position demanded figures run through mathematical formulas. But at the end of the day, what was lost were things like core values, returning clients, motivated employees, and the wrong decisions were made. The company doesn't exist anymore.
Barry, can you take this away? Because then maybe I can share one of the pictures that I did shared this weekend. And that, let me see if I can share this. Are you seeing anything at the moment?
And we're
Yeah,
seeing
we see
three tiny slides.
Yeah, I'm trying
Planetary
to
Balance, it's
Yeah.
tiny slides.
I'm trying to open one. It may take a little bit.
What-
But the thing is that I like your analogy with the functions part, and the functions rather than chaos and everything. Because what Eugen is saying here is that we need to think in a different way, because that is what Einstein says. You know, you can't solve the same problems in the same way of thinking and acting as we did before. If you look at this line here underneath where we have these players, then we
wait a moment. We only see your map. We don't see the full picture.
Oh, you don't see the full, okay. Then I have to maybe stop sharing and share again. And then I share again. I guess that will be doing the trick. And how about now?
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Now the underneath part here is where we come from. What I do, I invite the people to the core human values, and those 5 core human values here. But I still respect their original type of positioning. I still respect that a government is a government. I still respect, maybe I don't respect the politics behind it, but I do respect that a government is a government. And I do respect that particular business institutions are business institutions. I'm claiming and asking them not to come to a revolution, but to an evolution. Maybe participating is recognizing them in their authenticity, that they actually have a contribution here and this. There are numerous type of players around this in this place which have absolutely nothing to do at the top level, but because they don't have any contribution, not technology, because they're only money driven. So they will have a likelihood of disappearing. But the most important thing is that from a functional point of view, they have their function here. They don't have to transform too much of their organization. Maybe some of the positioning of their organization, the interrelationships will be different. And that is what we call transformation. And that is what we call at management level and at directors level and at leadership level, that they go through a different line of thinking because of the positioning. But in essence, their contribution, their organization, the institution is unchanged. And that is a major difference, because I'm not asking anybody to change more than what they contribute to society and their dependence. And once we create here values, then we could split up the values and separate them again among each of the players, and they can be brought back to this lower system. And we expand them again across the world as values. If we have created technology that can help us create that those core human values, then why should we not offer that technology to the rest of the world? And that's what we do. If we have invented new policies and we can create policies which make healthy cities, and we show that, and we can make videos of it, and we can show how government is interacting with citizens, then we can show that to the world, and other cities will say, oh, well, we like this, we would like to do this too, and then we can help them do it and overcome their complexity. So in essence, I think it is summarizing a little bit what everybody is saying here. We're not talking about chaos. We're trying to overcome chaos simply by looking at maybe transforming some of the functions, but within the reality of each of the players.
You know, Eugen is halfway between rules and functions. Eugen, you had something called agile rules, or you had the word agile in there somewhere. An agile rule is a rule that's not a hard and fast rule. It's got a little curvature to it. And that's getting towards a function. And so an agile rule is sort of halfway to a genuine function. A genuine
Okay.
function, you would solve the system model for ethical best practices. You get a real function, maybe continuous, maybe differentiable. An agile rule is halfway there.
Without mathematics.
Right. It's sort of intuitively getting to something that's not a hard and fast rule. It's got a little give to it.
Yeah, then
And-
we are on the same page again.
Exactly. So I'm not against agile rules. I think agile rules is a wonderful way to get towards a function without doing the math. If you did the math, you would get the optimal
Yeah.
shape, the
Agile-
optimal feedback loop.
Yeah, agile rules to me means providing the boundaries within which decisions can be made.
Yeah.
People have asked that. Yeah. People in the field, in large organizations, have asked that. And then things can happen in self-organizing ways instead of widget traffic lights in the procedures.
So I'm not against agile rules. It's a halfway step. And I understand why you need to do it, because if you go all the way to functions, then you lose 95% of your public because they don't know what
Exactly.
you're talking about.
That's it. Plus, as I mentioned before, well, people, decision makers, need information, in maybe mathematical, but if that is not possible, pattern type information to make the smart decisions. We have lost this ability.
Well, there has been a study by one of our friends in the Netherlands who was looking at political systems and governance, and he came to the conclusion that government is and that is not only government, city government or national government, it's also the government of a business. They're very capable of self-reflection, and but they're extremely incapable of self-correction. And that is because all the consequences of any decision in countering their position in a particular network is so intense that if they start disputing that, and the risk of maybe even the company or whatever going down is so incredible that they fear to do so. You have to have a great guts to do so. Nokia did it once many years ago when they went from a company of domestic products into telecom, and they let go of just about absolutely everything. But that is only one example. There's not many companies that actually go through that incredible transformation process. Government is extremely difficult to let go, for instance, of politics and lead that kind of leadership into a participation society where they actually facilitate citizens taking charge of their own community. We are going towards that, but we have to force them. We have to invite them to that particular context because they can't do it by themselves.
Let me show you one real quick slide that in a rule-based system, you have a hard and fast rule that to one side you have you're good, the other side you're a criminal, and you have this breaking point. This is a standard rule, which you could say in English, if, then, or else.
Mm-hmm.
This is
You've shown it before. You've shown it before.
Yeah, this is the alternative. This is an agile rule. It gradually transitions so that as you're in this vicinity, you have a gradient, which means that as you ascend this gradient, your punishment or your cost or your penalty or your tax or whatever rises continuously and differentiably. So you can ride this thing anywhere you want. If you have a gradient in an agile rule that's a nice, graceful function, then as you get to this place where previously you fell off a cliff, now it just ascends gradually. This is sort of an economic model. This is what you need instead of a hard and fast rule. This one, the if then or else is chaos, because a slight perturbation in behavior is a catastrophic change in the outcome. Whereas if you're on the blue curve, a slight change in behavior has a slight change in the consequence. So an agile rule would simply replace a hard and fast rule with something like that.
Well, recognizable it is, but if you consider this just as one single organization, but if you look at the function of that organization in the context of a particular ecosystem, then we have to look at those lines that affect the lines of just everything around them. So if I look at a current governor in a city, one of the councillors, then they are being lobbied so strongly in a particular position by all kind of dependent institutions that it's for them extremely difficult to go through that line, or else because they will be sacrificed.
Right.
And
It's
that,
catastrophic to cross the line.
that's right.
If you have a nice continuous differentiable function, then you can ride it.
That's right.
Just pay more and more taxes or whatever you pay as a penalty.
But I'd take them along to one where everybody is going through that same line at the same time,
Yeah.
which is incredible because citizens are changing at the same time. It's like what we say here. If we want change, it is not one after the other, it's everybody together. And being able to do that, that is an extreme challenge.
Getting people to be functional means you got to understand what the hell a function is
Hmm.
and live with the world of functions and not the world of rules. So many people grow up in the world of rules and they can't think of anything other than rule-based regulation, which is mathematically chaotic. And I think we're at the point where enough people understand the concept of a function to replace rules by functions, even if they're only called agile rules.
Eugen.
Yeah. Yeah, for one, my wife is waiting with the supper and my brain is slowly closing down after a very intensive day. So I would like to come to an end. So, but I still wonder what I've shown you. Would that be an opening for initiating or getting the discussions to the point where a paradigm change could be possible at the larger levels, when we ask project owners, decision makers, and what are you actually communicating? Well, to the people in the target audience. You want them to get on board, but you're communicating that symptoms are treated while the root causes remain unsolved. Wouldn't that be a possibility?
I think it's possible. I mean, you have an example. The technologists who understand protocols and understand functions built the internet. You have 1 billion nodes on the internet and they do not fight with each other. You don't have ARP storms. You don't have these, when they first built packet networks, they had storms because they didn't have a stable protocol. If you can understand why don't 1 billion nodes on the internet fight with each other, it's because they're all using a common protocol that's carefully crafted to be stable. And if you can live with the internet and say, how come the internet doesn't have wars? I mean, the machines on the internet don't have wars. Why can't we learn from that? We've lived with this demonstrated concept for 30 years now.
Well,
can we use that? Can we use that as an analogy for people?
Challenging.
Yeah.
Well,
at least you have a demonstrated example of 1 billion population of machines that don't fight with each other. They don't go to war with each other. They're protocol based.
Sounds idealistic, and I would like to go back to Eugen and say that I tried to give the people a choice, a yes/no choice.
That's a good one, yeah.
And when they have a choice, they can either say, no, I don't, or I do. And in terms of, for instance, the air quality activities that we have in the region, then we invited everybody and they said, yes, we want this because there is a particular urgency in the region and a community arose which has a lot of players right now. And then this internet thing that Barry is saying, that the diversity interacting in dynamic clusters and everything and coming up and organizing them around this particular value of air quality and human health is actually working a bit like the freedom that we have in internet. But they had to have the initial choice. When I invite people to care for each other, which is cozy, it's a different type of community. I'm managing to get a certain amount of people, but I don't get government, for instance, participating because they have too many institutions taking over responsibility from people and they have particular interests and they don't, and they say no. And then I ask them to come up with an explanation and they don't. When I'm working on food resilience in the city, creating space in the city, using buildings, using public space and everything for food production, I get certain innovative companies along. I can get students along that are experimenting with new technologies and new insights. I get citizens along who want to participate in food production. I don't get government along. Their priorities are still very much focused on a totally different paradigm on city organization than self-sufficiency within the city. So it is, it's like the yes and no choice that is absolutely necessary. And then we can indeed go into everything that each of you is saying, the freedom of co-creation and the freedom of, and the talking to managers on how to develop their activities in a different way.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me to give people a choice. I think I need to reflect that in what I produce here.
All right.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you
with
very much.
that-
Yeah, you look hungry, and of course, yes. Okay, yeah, I have to do something with food here too for the family, so they're waiting too. Thank you very much. It's been a small team, but that intensifies the interaction very much more. So very grateful for this. I recorded it, so with your permission, I will put this on the internet and see if anybody has the patience to actually go through 2 hours through all this and see what kind of feedback we're going to get out of that.
We need to tell stories instead of doing these academic presentations.
That's no, but this is good. This is good enough, and we still need to do the role play that I suggested one day. So next time, today is the 8th. Next time is the 15th, and the 15th we have this playful monk who will be joining us, and so I wonder what he will be doing with us, and hopefully he comes into this drama and type and comedy type of activity. So maybe he gets very much lined up with everything that we've been saying so far.
Right. Turn this pedantic stuff into an edutaining drama, a comedy drama, so that it gets to a larger audience. Even if you lose some of the technical stuff, that's fine. I don't care if you lose some of the math, as long as you can get the concept across to a wider audience.
As long as they make the choice in favor of core human values, that is great. If they recognize themselves in it.
Survival is a core human value.
Yeah, all right.
Okay. See you.
All right, guys.
Nice day.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care for now. Bye then.
Bye-bye.